Hi, everyone. You're at No Kill in Motion. I'm David Smith from No Kill, Colorado. I'm here today with James Evan from CARE. CARE is an organization that works in the interest of human and animal well-being, prioritizes and amplifies BIPOC voices using narratives, research, and community-centered investments. James is the CEO. He launched Pets for Life years ago at HSUS. He's done a lot since then. Go to the website careawo.org. You can learn more about James and CARE after this segment. Good to see you, James. How are you?
Likewise, David. How are you?
All right.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you. Today, what I want to talk about is one of the things I love about the website is the videos. I share them all the time. I watch them all the time. Just the other day, I shared, I forget the name of the song. It's
That's My Dog.
That's My Dog. It is great. The video is great. The music is great. The message is fantastic. And your first video that I ever saw was the one where you had all the people in the field. Yeah. And you showed the ways that we reject people in animal shelters. And I thought that was one of the most powerful videos I've ever seen about adoption and the thing. But I want to talk about some of the new ones that I've seen in the last year since we talked last time. Yeah. One of the ones that really moved me was Leslie, the retired police officer. Yeah. Leslie, for those of you who don't know, please go look at the video. Again, careawo.org. Go look at this video of Leslie. She was someone who had a dog that was a love of her life, like so many of us, and she lost that dog. That's the tragedy of most of us, right? We lose most of the pets in our lives. And then she applied 16 different applications, and she could not get a pet. And she got to the point she was saying she would take anything, and she just couldn't get it. I just thought this was a powerful video. Leslie, tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you. And David, thanks for sharing, and everybody that's out there. Sharing in this sort of world that we live in is so powerful. Just to share the video is a powerful thing. And I actually see Leslie almost, maybe 3 times a day. I take our dogs, both rescue dogs, to the park almost every day in the morning. And Leslie is super fastidious, and she lives in an underserved community. And so much of this is related to that, right? So she lives in an underserved community, and literally we use the term underserved because so often the community is actually underserved. So a trash route in a middle-class neighborhood is going to be timely. It's going to happen all the time, at the same day, at the same time. But in Baltimore and places like Detroit, it seems that the system, if it's interrupted, it doesn't mind interrupting underserved communities. So sometimes the trash does not come when it's supposed to. And so Leslie drops off her trash in the dumpster near the park where I play with the dogs 3 times a week, because she doesn't like to wait for the trash to come to her house, trash truck. And just at first I thought it was just by coincidence that I happened to be talking to a woman about the difficulty of adoption, and it's something that we specialize in. But then I had a second thought and realized it wasn't a coincidence. It just happens so often, right? I mean, think about that. She literally was driving to the park. She complimented me on our dog Guapo, because Doc Guapo is Guapo. He's very handsome. And
I haven't met him, but I've seen him. He's gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, and now we have Rocky, and Rocky's an Akita, and Leslie got out and she said, at the time she said that it was, I think, 16 times, but she went up to 19 different rejections. Number 16 was the one that hurt her the most, because she actually filled out the application. She was invited to come visit the dog. She had the dog in her arms, and then she said she felt like it was an instant bond with she and the Great Dane. And when she gave the dog back, they told her to come into the office, and she thought she was signing adoption papers. And they actually told her they didn't think she could afford a Great Dane, and sent her on her way. And she said she'd never been so humiliated in her life. She's a retired police officer. she still works because she still works at the hospital because she likes being around people. And she said to me, James, I didn't fill out any financial information at all.
Oh,
Why
wow.
would they think I couldn't afford the dog? And I said, Leslie, you know, your zip code is one of the more underserved zip codes in Baltimore City. And I suspect you were either on sight unseen, folks assumed you lived in a impoverished state, and then you are there in person and they can see now that you're African American, because talking to her on the phone, you wouldn't hear this stereotypical, you know, urban Black voice. So you know, she was really shuddered because she kept saying, I did what you asked me to do. She said, I've had two Great Danes my whole life. Both of them lived beyond 12 years old, which is a lot for Great Danes.
Yes.
And right, and she loves these dogs. And so she purchased both of them. And she said, you know, I saw an ad that said, don't shop, adopt. And so she said, I did exactly what the ad told me to do. And I was rejected 16 times. And so we bumped into each other periodically over the first quarter of this year. And I promised we would help her find a dog. And right at rejection 19, we did help her find a dog from a rescue in New Jersey. And so that was amazing. And now I see her at the park with Rudy, and she could not be happier. So it's really upsetting, and we wanted to kind of just let her tell her story, because it's so plain, it's so earnest.
It's a beautiful story. It's a tragic story. You know, she's such a beautiful person in the video.
She is.
She's so charismatic in telling that story, and you know, I hope more people look at it. I'll probably share it again after this, just because we're talking about it. I want to get on and talk about a couple of narratives. Then I looked at The Messenger Matters. I don't think I got the name of the girl who was in
Bianca.
Bianca, but it was really interesting. It's great that she actually got there, but I could see the challenges that she had in actually becoming an animal welfare professional when she was doing it. This happens a lot, right? People are volunteering. They do these things on their own, whether in an organization or not. And then people don't necessarily respect them because of who they are or who they look like or who they sound like. So tell me more about Bianca, because she was another one that I really, really resonated with me.
Yeah, Bianca is, I'm going to try not to get too upset, because Bianca, like, you know, she's close to my heart, because she is so much like so many people that I've grown up with in my life. Bianca makes under 20 at the time of that video. Bianca was making less than $26,000 a year. With two children at home. And somehow on that living, Bianca still does her own food kitchen. She makes food for homeless people. She feeds the homeless. And she also makes her own homemade dog biscuits. And she does a considerable amount of rescuing. And she's got if you name the animal that's, you know, under 50 pounds, she has it in her house. So she's an old school farm girl, and she just loves animals and she loves people. And Bianca's story, David, is the story. It is the BIPOC story. It's this reflective desire to want one of two things. One, the appearance of inclusion in your organization, or, and I'll be quite frank, the advent of Pets for Life, I think, put brown and Black communities on donors' radars. Once donors are aware that there's a problem to be solved that they're interested in funding in, they put a red line in this red flag in the sand, and they say, I'm interested in this, right? And so as soon as donors become interested in something, organizations go chasing after that money. And they say, oh, I need to have a Pets for Life like program in Atlanta, or a Pet for Life program in Detroit or wherever else, but they don't have the interest in it beyond the acquisition of those donor dollars. And so they reach out to folks like Bianca and Tim Friedman, and they know those folks are from the neighborhood. So they use those folks to win those proposals to get into those neighborhoods, but they're not vested from heart out. They're most interested in winning contracts. And so that's why that original quote you asked me in the other segment about why we need to start with racial equity before we start focusing on inclusion and diversity. You know, we need to be very conscious of the unparalleled racial conditions and structural racism that we're all living with, and not ask people like Bianca just to exist so that we can win a contract.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. Actually, James, the way you said that, I don't think I ever really thought of it that way. But now I see it clearly, like right now, which I don't think I saw it clearly before this conversation.
Yeah, and then once you have Bianca, I mean, keep in mind, I don't think this will be strange news, and it's certainly not untrue. When in Pets for Life heyday, in the early beginnings of hiring folks, I think there were somewhere around 7 or 8 Black men and women, and I don't mean BIPOC, I mean Black, like African American. And as that program progressed, none of those Black members of the outreach team or the street teams or the coordinator levels, none of those people made it up to middle management, and none of them work there at all anymore, period. And so
that's okay.
None of them. I don't mean 3 or 4 didn't make it. I mean, none of the Black people hired in the heyday of Pets for Life ascended beyond a coordinator level. And to me, we have to, if we're going to say we're making these investments in underserved communities, we need to meet people where they are. We need to ensure that, one, you know, those folks that we need to articulate a program in an underserved community, they can articulate our program because they speak a certain language that the community understands.
Sure.
We are in a corporate DC K Street environment, and we know we can't take our K Street language and go speak it in the middle of Detroit. So we have to use people from Detroit to speak that language, but we have to get beyond just using them for their ability to translate and actually bring them in and host them and become family, so that we're not extracting, right, from brown and Black folks. Like that is slavery. That is the heart of slavery, is extraction. And so Bianca is a perfect example of an organization saying, I need you to translate for me. But as soon as she walks into that organization, into their walls, and she believes that she's of value, so she doesn't translate back into K Street for them. She stays her, as she calls it, her ghetto self.
Right. And
it ruffles feathers, because when you live in an underserved community and you are accustomed to, you have to be plain. You can't be, to survive in an underserved community, you cannot be ambiguous. You can't appear to have an intention that people don't understand, because tensions are just too high. And so folks in underserved neighborhoods are used to being very plain. They tend to be very plain spoken. Poor people in general tend to be very plain spoken, because what do they have to lose? They're already struggling to eat as it is. It's only once you have more than you need, then you become very nuanced about your speech, because you're trying to make sure you don't offend anyone. Because if you offend someone, you might lose something. But if you have nothing, you tend just to be, you know, very plain. And so that, I think, is the struggle with people like Bianca, who are filterless, because that's the way she survived. And so if we are going to engage people because they don't have a filter, then we need to accept what that means, and embrace it, and not just extract from it whenever we desire.
Yeah, and she expressed that very well, in what she was talking about herself, the way
Yeah.
she talks, the way she communicates. And you could see that she was somebody who, we didn't get the whole backstory that you just gave us, but her success was apparent. Like I could tell that she was actually pretty remarkable in what she did.
She is, I am going to say that Bianca, in her sheer understanding of the animal welfare scene, animals in general, that she has an insane encyclopedic knowledge of everything from dogs to reptiles. Bianca could be on a platform similar to a Kitty Block at HSUS any day of the week. The problem is that because of her accent, because of the way she presents herself, it would be hard for anyone to accept that. But she is an insanely brilliant person, so much so that we hired her.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's recent. We just hired her on staff
Right.
to help us with some research, some community-based research. So we're doing community-based research using people in the community to be a part of the research process, as opposed to doing research on them. We're doing research with them.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Hey, I want to move on to one more because we're going to run out of time.
Yep.
Because it's really close to my heart. Samantha and Emma, I have this thing about homeless people with pets. I believe that there's no bond like it. I wish I could have the bond that most of those people have with their own pets. And so many people, I think there's a lot of judgment there of when people pass people with pets on the side of the road, sitting in front of the 7-Eleven with their dog with a little sign. And she talks about that judgment. Tell me more about Samantha and Emma. First of all, where were they? Were they? As an accent, that was New British accent. I was wondering if you were actually in the US.
She is not from the US, and that was shot in New Orleans.
Okay.
Jen, my partner in crime and wife, found her, talked to her. She said, come down here and bring the camera. So we filmed her sort of right out in the open. There are two incredible things about Samantha. One, she is also brilliant. Two, she was abandoned by a gentleman. So she had no plans to be homeless, and she didn't have plans to have a dog. She actually rescued the dog just like any one of us would. It was tethered and dying outside in the heat. And so she untethered it and gave it water and took it with her. So one of my struggles with this sort of judgment we have, not just about homeless people, but underserved people, this idea that if they don't have what the animal needs, they shouldn't have the animal. And I say back to that animal welfare, sheltering, and rescue in general is completely codependent on donations. So ultimately, shelters and rescues can't afford pets either, right?
That's a great analogy.
Right?
I never thought of that.
Right?
That's a really good analogy.
The whole field is codependent on donations. And so if it were not for tax dollars and it were not for personal and corporate donations, shelters and rescues would not be able to afford or care for pets. And so to me, I would like shelters and rescues and those working in the field to understand that their hands, whether or not it may not be your hands, but some development officers' hands, are out all the time. There are no, outside of politics, you're not going to find a heavier use of the donate button than in animal welfare. And so if
you're gonna make me, I'm gonna start calling home anyone I see who doesn't have a home and a pet, I'm gonna start saying, oh yeah, they're one person, one animal rescue.
That's exactly right.
Call them from now on. That's
what they are.
That's exactly what they are.
And so
that's amazing.
In my mind, right? I'm going to get in trouble for this at one point, but I want to see less what we consider shelters, because every home in America is a potential shelter. There are 161 million homes right now without pets and 7 million or so animals that need a home. So we're doing something wrong. I would rather see the $5 billion or $7 billion that we're spending on warehousing animals to ensuring that people that want pets have them. And even if we took those dollars and we said, you know, Samantha, do you need money for food? Do you need money for veterinary care? It's better to me to take the problem and spread it out over society so that all of society that is willing to take on that weight of housing and caring for animals, let's all share the weight instead of 3,500 shelters and rescues over the country trying to bear the weight of 7 million. It doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, and actually, I mean, I was following those numbers. I haven't looked at them in a while, but I know that it comes out to something like, 30 million people a year looking to bring a pet into their life. And the fact is, if you take out the ones that are already going to get adopted, because we have these many adoptions each year.
That's right.
We have 8 times more people looking to bring a pet into their life every year than the pets that are dying in our shelters. That's an insane number to me. It always has been, and it's grown over the last 5 years.
And the 30 million is grotesquely lower than what it should be. Because to be honest, we're not even properly measuring people of color, because we hardly ever do.
Good point.
And people like Leslie are telling her friends and relatives about the 16 times she's been rejected.
Right.
So we have I think a grotesque way of looking at the problem, and part of that is because the large orgs are constantly telling us that animals are suffering somewhere. And most of the ads that you see, those animals that we are pointing at and saying that they are suffering, they're really the companions of poor folks. So without knowing it, you have large orgs like the A, like HSUS, that are running ads that bring them a considerable amount of money, that are constantly pointing at not abuse, but they're pointing at poverty. Poverty is solvable when you have a $30 million shelter, right? In the middle of DC or the middle of Atlanta. Poverty is solvable when you start thinking about, what if we don't have to house these animals, and we're actually leaving them at home or encouraging people to take them and foster them long term with our support. So I'd like to look at what this imbalance and say, how do we share the weight? How do we get more people involved with sharing the weight versus organizations trying to expand and transporting animals all over the damn planet at the cost of the planet, by the way. So yeah, I think I am not here to be popular, and I know what I'm saying is not popular, but I think there's an inertia that comes with rolling down a hill trying to solve a problem quickly, as opposed to stopping and asking yourself, how do we get here? How do we resolve things? What are some smarter ways of doing things that aren't so reactionary?
All right. Well, James, this has been fantastic. We are out of time. I do want to see you again here, right? This is the second time I've had you. I definitely want you back. There's so much I would cover if we had time.
Yeah. I'll be back.
Thank you so much for being here. Again, everybody, careawo.org. Please go out to that site. Look at these narratives, the beautiful videos shot by this group. I think James has a lot of hand in it. If you look at his photography, you'll know that he had his hand in it. And we'll see you again, James. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, always.
All right.